Thank you, Paul, and thank you all for joining us today. Just want to remind Dirk Facer, it's the little button on the right side of your screen to unmute before we get started. But hey, listen, I want to start by thanking some incredible people that helped us get to yesterday's announcement. And it starts with our student athletes who have shown their absolute dedication to do the right things, to be focused on the things that they can control as this whole virus has developed. And I'm really proud of them, and the fact that we were able to deliver this news to them yesterday was really one of the best moments of my entire career. I want to thank our doctors and our trainers for their absolute commitment to creating the best possible path for us here at the University of Utah. Incredible collaboration, not only with the athletic medical team, but with the campus medical team as well. We've always felt that we've had an unbelievably safe environment for our students during their various practices that they've been going through, whatever sport that they're competing in, and that doesn't change today. We're excited about everything that they've provided us throughout this process, and we're very grateful. And finally, to President Watkins, she has just been terrific working with me in our space. She's got an incredible university to run with so many responsibilities, but her engagement, her listening to all of the issues surrounding yesterday's decision has been phenomenal. She's an incredible leader, and we're really grateful with her commitment to our student athletes and her always advocating on their behalf. So I want to make sure I really mention those groups. And of course, our coaches and our staff and everyone here in the athletic department. Yesterday was a terrific day in so many different ways. And because of their collective efforts, we were able to get to that point. So I want to call them out and say how much I personally appreciate them. Paul, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. We'll begin the Q&A portion. We'll start with Josh Newman from the Salt Lake Tribune, followed by Dana Greene.
Hi, Mark. How are you?
Good, Josh.
I understand that there is a desire to move in lockstep and for everyone to start on the same date. How much momentum was there to potentially, one, starting on Halloween, and two, potentially making that a staggered start with maybe half the league beginning on Halloween and the other half beginning on November 7th?
Well, all I can speak to is the athletic director room, and certainly it was something that was discussed quite a bit. And we would poll pretty regularly to find out, who thinks they can go at this time based on what they were managing in their particular county. It's something that we thought would have some merit if we had a certain amount of schools that could get to that place. Obviously, we've said all along that if we can find some flexibility in our schedule, that would be something that we would be interested in doing. At the end of the day, with constant changes on what teams could be able to do, a real desire always to have a full 6 weeks. I think that all came down to, let's just equalize this. Let's make sure we all have the same ramp up time and go ahead and start together. But it was certainly something that was discussed in great detail, but we're perfectly fine to march forward as presented.
Okay, Dana Greene with ABC4, to be followed by Trevor Allen, KSL.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for doing this. My question is, with the Pac-12 playing fewer games than the rest of the Power 5 conferences, what are your thoughts on the possibility of Pac-12 being left out of the college football playoffs should they have a team eligible to be included in that?
Dana, we may have scheduled fewer as we begin this, but that doesn't necessarily mean we'll have fewer. And I think, like I do, I'm watching the landscape. Teams are trying to play and they can't. I think University of Houston has tried to start their season 4 or 5 weeks in a row, and they just haven't been able to do it. So we go into this eyes wide open, knowing that we hope to get all those games in, just like any other conference hopes to get all those games in. But if it stays as is, which is the premise of your question, I do believe, particularly if we have a really strong team, whether that's an undefeated team or maybe a one-loss type team, that wins our conference and the way our schedule will be laid out, I think that team should absolutely be considered. But that's why we have a committee. Rick George is the Pac-12 representative on the playoff committee. Those are great people. They're smart people, and they're always kind of given the charge to bring forward the 4 best teams. So hopefully our team will have the qualities that those committee members look for. But I would be cautious to look at someone's schedule and just assume. We all don't know how many games we're going to get in. We'll just have to wait and see what happens.
Okay, Trevor Allen, KSL, to be followed by Ross Terrell of KUER.
Hey, Mark. I was wondering if you and Kyle have already put together a timeline of when practice is going to start. I know that it depends on the school and the local health authorities, but I mean, are you guys going to start probably within the next week?
Well, to clarify, our guys have been working out. We are currently in the NCAA model 12-hour allowable, which does allow, I believe, up to 5 hours of skill instruction on the field. And Coach Winningham has really worked with his coaches, have really developed a great system, dividing the team out and utilizing those hours. So he'll make the decision on what he wants to do, obviously, but the choice is either to stay in those 12 hours until we go into camp, which would either be October 9th or 10th, or we could switch to a 20-hour, which is less on-field activity. It's more of a chance to look at film and do kind of more weight room activity. So we really have two choices here at the University of Utah and the rest of the league. So Coach Witt, I'm sure, is going through with his guys and what he wants to do. And I'm sure he'll present that next week.
Okay, Ross Terrell, KUER, followed by Josh Furlong, KSL.
Hey, Mark. One of the things we've heard throughout this whole process is the effect that no season would have on the budget. We've heard about the department-wide furloughs. Does a return to play even without fans, does this have any impact on that?
Well, certainly, we'll depending on how many games are played throughout this 20 season, we'll know at the end how much revenue that brings from a television standpoint. As we talked about before, there's a contractual amount of games that go into that and how many we get to. So we'll wait and see when the dust clears how many games we get in. But you did mention no fans, and we know here at Utah that's still a very significant financial hit. But more than that, it's there was a great day yesterday for our student athletes and for our coaches, and you can imagine. But there was also real disappointment for our fans. We have no question the best fans in this conference. Our sellout streaks and everything that they've contributed to, and quite candidly, they've helped us win so many football games, and of course in the arena as well. So that was tough. Have full respect for the decision, understand it, but I know some of our students I've talked to, they just can't imagine not having them there. But overall, to your question about finances, we know we're still dealing with significant financial challenges despite yesterday's announcement, but obviously we have a chance to have more revenue than maybe we would have thought of a few weeks ago. So we're going to continue to adhere to our budget and to all the policies that we put in place to manage our way through this, knowing that there could be a light here at the end of the tunnel that we'll have more revenue that we weren't necessarily counting on.
Josh Furlong, KSL, followed by Josh Newman, Salt Lake Tribune.
Mark, yesterday in the presser, Oregon's president said that the decision to return really didn't have anything to do with money. Obviously, following up on kind of what you had just said, how much of that decision, at least from your side of it, is about money? Obviously, you want these kids to play and you want them to have their seasons and do that. But looking at the types of money that you can get out of the college football playoffs or the bowl games, I mean, how much of that is a consideration in this return?
It has nothing to do with the considerations, Josh. The consideration of all of this goes back to why we paused in the first place, postponed, and it got to the questions that the medical board had brought forward. Chief amongst those is just the testing capacity at that time and the lack of really having antigen testing, for example, or abundance of PCR testing, and concern that we would spread it by playing sport, and then as such spread it to our broader communities. And as you also remember, a lot of questions about the post effects. So as you guys saw, it was released yesterday, the medical advisory board restated their positions on those things, and certainly we've been benefited greatly as a conference by Commissioner Scott securing the antigen testing, which by the way is now on our campus, and we're going through training with the folks that will be running that. Look forward to hopefully getting that operational here really, really soon, if not by next week. So all of those things led to the pause. We didn't back then say, oh my gosh, we're going to lose $60 million. We can't do this. None of that factored in. It was straight up from their recommendation to the ADs and to the coaches, and certainly eventually to our presidents and chancellors. So the same is true now. They come back and they're much more comfortable. They believe we have the medical issues somewhat understood, and the things we need to adhere to. A byproduct of that, of course, is we can now put our games on television that will allow some revenue to come into the organization. But I can tell you unequivocally, both the decision back on August 11th from my lens and yesterday's decision had everything to do with the new medical guidelines, but also recognizing that does allow revenue to flow.
Okay, Josh Newman, followed by Dirk Facer, Deseret News.
Mark, whatever furlough program you had in place for the athletic department, will furloughs continue or will that stop? And is there any possibility that people that may have been laid off, may they possibly return now in some capacity? Yeah,
like I mentioned earlier, Josh, we still are going to be really dealing with the unknown in terms of revenue. We can pull out our abacus and look how many games on our schedule and do the average television number, but we just don't know how many of those games we're going to get in. So we have to go in with the assumption that that's a great unknown, and as such, we need to stay the course as it relates to our budget management, and that is operationally and with employees. So our furlough program, which range anywhere from 2 to 9 weeks, of which many folks in the organization have already begun that process. We're going to continue that, with the exception of, obviously, if folks are on furlough that are going to be directly involved with some of the changes that the organization has to now go through with possible football game within 6 weeks now. Here, we don't know where the game will be until the schedule is finalized. So some of those folks we may have to adjust, but we're planning on sticking to our all-in commitment on furloughs and everybody in the organization, and we see no reason to change that, with the exception of maybe having to change dates so that we're fully ready to go and always possible.
Next up is Dirk Facer, Deseret News, followed by Mike Sorensen, Deseret News.
Mark, I've been working on the buttons. I think I got it figured out. So
you were the fastest one to come in there. That is great improvement.
Not bad for an old guy. Hey, I wanted to ask you about the schedule. There seems to be a lot of consternation about the crossover game counting. What was the thought process behind that? Because it would seem like if you want to find the best team in the division, why not just count divisional play this year?
Well, again, as I mentioned before, it's great to be talking about something like that, right? The great sports debates that rage in living rooms across the conference. Yeah, I can give you some insight on that. I think it's something we spent a great deal of time talking about. Where I came to, and again, I can't speak for all my colleagues, but where I came to on this matter is we don't know how many games we're going to get in, right? Sorry if I keep going back to that point. We may lose games along the way. The way it's set up, there is no place to put the games. So if we're playing a Pac-12 game and it so happens to be a crossover, they got to count. And I think that's where our coaches and athletic directors by and by netted out to. I'm not going to say every person agreed with that by any means, but the idea of us playing a crossover game and it not counting, and then the following week, let's say we play a South Division opponent that we can't play because of the virus, then all of a sudden we have 2 non-countable games. And you had to look at it from that practical standpoint, Dirk. That's kind of where I ended it out. The process of choosing the crossover game is underway. We're looking at that. We're also being very careful to not affect the 21 season, which has always been a tenet in all of this. And so the availability of those particular crossover games to any institution can affect the home and away of 21. So that's all being worked through. What we do know about the schedule is we're going to play, obviously, our South opponents. The home teams will be the same home teams that were previously scheduled to come in. So we'll see Arizona come to Salt Lake. We'll see USC come to Salt Lake. And then we'll be going to Colorado. We'll be going to UCLA. And we'll be going to Arizona State. We know that, and we await our crossover game.
Okay, Mike Sorensen, Deseret News, followed by Chris Camrani, The Athletic.
Yeah, Mark, can you update us on any news that might have come out of the basketball coaches meeting last night as far as scheduling? And also, do you anticipate having fans allowed for the basketball games after January 1st?
Well, I can't say anything specifically out of the basketball meeting last night, except they were updated on the vote, made sure that everybody was on the same page. I was not on the call, but on my briefing, coaches continue to look at the viability of a 20-game league season versus an 18-game league season. Just right before we jumped on this call, the NCAA released its testing standards for basketball. I think everyone's been kind of waiting for that. I believe in my quick look at that, they're going to have to test 3 times a week. We know within our league that anybody that we play out of conference in basketballs or others as we move forward is going to have an expectation of testing, 24 hours before a contest. So we're going to have to align with non-conference teams that have to adhere to that to be able to play, whether it's home on the road. So we got a lot of work to do. A lot of that work's going on, as we say, and that's both on men's and women's basketball as we finalize those decisions. And then also see where we're at with contracts. A lot of that work's been done, but now that we have some definite things to work off of, I imagine we'll have some finalization of that hopefully by the end of next week. That's my desire. What
about fans next year, like after the new year?
Yeah, as I understand it to be that there'll be a look in as close to January 1 as we can, based on the evaluations that the presidents and chancellors will look at. Obviously, I really hope that we can have our fans join us as soon as possible. So we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. But hopefully, maybe that end of that period in December, they'll take a look and take another look at all the data in the various different counties of the 12 universities and make some decisions so that when we get into the new year, if there's a change in that, we can get our fans involved back in our sporting events. Obviously for us, we know there's going to be a lot of sports going on in the spring. We lead the nation in attendance in gymnastics. They always have that first meet sometime in the early part of January. So we'll cross our fingers that when we get to that place, our fans can rejoin us.
Next is Chris Camrani and then Dana Greene, ABC4.
Hey, Mark. Yesterday, Oregon President Michael Schill said the reason why the schools didn't vote was they wanted to take extra time to talk to their student athletes. And I'm wondering if that applied to you at Utah, and if so, what did you get out of the last week of conversations that maybe you didn't necessarily have the previous few weeks that we were waiting for this to happen?
Well, we're always in communication with our student athletes, myself, my leadership team. I'm talking to coaches. Specific to this last week, I had a chance to talk to some of the leaders of our teams via Zoom. Had in particular, football comes to mind, and really walk them through what the week was going to be like. We had our doctors on. We wanted our doctors to be very, very available to our students throughout this whole process. And I think, Chris, without question, what has been a constant theme is their comfortability of working out, their comfortability of wanting and being very desirous to get into contact practice, which they've not allowed to do, and certainly get back to competition. So the excitement as Thursday was getting closer was certainly building here. And the other students that I've been talking to. So, collectively, very, very excited for them. But knowing we have a great responsibility to continue to have all our guidelines in place and be very strict that we all follow the protocols as we head into this next step. But it's always great talking to students, on any issue. Their voices have been so critical throughout this whole process. And even before, but particularly as we went into the March dynamic of COVID, they've provided some really good feedback on things that are working, things that we can do better. And they've been awesome, and a key reason why we were able to get to that yesterday.
Next, we'll go to Dana Greene, followed by David James, KUTV, and 1280 The Zone.
Hey, Mark, when should we expect to see the football schedule released, and how are they going to determine that extra home game for teams? Is it going to be random, geographically based? And then I assume when you said that, there's a possibility games could be canceled because of the virus during the course of this season, there's no room to be made up, so there's a chance that some teams will play fewer games than others?
Yeah, my anticipation is the schedule should be wrapped up by sometime the end of next week. I mean, there's just some things that we need to work out and iron out and have some more conversations with it. But I can't imagine that it would go much longer than into next week. no reason to rush it. You know, we want to make sure that everybody has a chance to weigh in. We'll meet with our football coaches again next week. In terms of the home and away, we took the concept that if you had one less home game on your typical 20 schedule, of which we would have been out of balance this year and played more games on the road, we would now, our crossover game would be the home game. So the idea that everyone would have at least 3 home games going into this. And so whoever, for Utah, whoever our cross opponent is, cross divisional, will be a home game. So that way everyone at least has a chance to go into 3 games. In terms of cancellation, we have some drafts on cancellation policies. What would trigger a team to not be able to play when you fall below certain numbers? That'll all be articulated going forward. Obviously the conference would be involved in all of that. We have great coaches. We have terrific leaders in the conference at the institutions, and we'll make sure that we all do it the correct and honest and equal way, as we frankly have been doing through this whole process, staying together and doing things the right way.
David James, then Josh Newman.
How many of your bowl partners are going to be playing, and some of the people who have earlier dates, are they going to be moving dates back later because the championship game is so late?
Yeah, I know the conference has been in communication with our bowl partners, DJ, and I think that's gonna pick up now that they all see that we're out and we're playing. The early indication is our bowl partners are planning on being very flexible. And our great hope is that we will be able to fill all our bowls will be there, and we'll have teams. You probably caught yesterday, Football Oversight Committee has pushed forward the waiving of the 500% win percentage requirement. So in essence, everyone will be eligible for bowls, and our Pac-12 football working group, I know, and Larry's group will be working on how we would slot those and all those kind of things going forward. But I'm anticipatory that the bowls will be ready to go, which again, if you go back to what our students asked for very, very significantly, as I listened to them and as I carried their voices into all of this, was really 3 key things, right? Provide the best health and safety environment that you can. 2, please keep an eye on our eligibility. We don't want to go into this and lose a year. So that got solved. This is a free year. They play these games. If they're a junior, they come back as a junior. That's just the way it is, right? And the 3rd thing was make it meaningful. Make sure there's a championship at the end and there's some postseason possibilities. And I think we've hit all those marks.
Josh Newman, then Sammy Mora, Daily Utah Chronicle.
Mark, I know that you said already that despite the south end zone being demolished, that that Rice Eccles is perfectly suitable to play a game. Are you able to outline though what some of the hurdles are, especially on game days with no locker rooms? Are you able to kind of outline what the problems may be?
Well, we'll start with the text I got from an athletic director in the last few days. If you put up a tent, it'll be better than the visiting locker room you've currently provided. So let's start from that premise to know that that's the feelings that our visitors have had here for years. Kyle Brennan and his incredible team on the internal side of the organization have had a plan in place to be able to manage football operations with our team and with our visitors. They're obviously, now that it's real, they'll start operationalizing everything. It certainly will be different. We might have to ask for extended halftime because we might have to walk a little bit further, but all those things are certainly doable. We're going to create the best possible environment for our students and officials and everybody else. But I have no worries at all that we'll be able to accomplish that. And it's incredibly ironic, and our staff here has talked about it, that the next game with our fans will be in our new expanded stadium. I mean, you just can't make that kind of stuff up. But that's where we're at, and we'll be able to manage it very effectively.
Sammy Mora, followed by Dirk Facer.
Hi, Mark. So with the announcement of the Pac-12 yesterday, they also said that winter sports would be coming back. So gymnastics and men's and women's swim and dive. Do you know when those teams will be able to start practice given those state and local guidelines?
Well, we're confident that their regular practice will be able to commence. For us, winter sports, as you mentioned, we really have laser focus on the sports that you mentioned. Obviously, basketballs. We've talked about swimming and diving. I know their coaching group will meet next week. They tend to have a fall season as well. So if there's any chance for them to get some meets in, they'll be talking about that. Gymnastics, we tend to not have any home events in December. Sometimes, of course, we do our exhibition, Meet the Red Rock activity. But I anticipate they're going to be able to practice. And I want to remind you again, we have been practicing. Out in my office here, I can see our swimmers right now through the window there. I mean, we have been able to practice and doing it the right way. So I think we'll be well positioned to go into that. And of course, our national champion ski team as well. We're working on how to get them all going. So that's the work that's going on now. Everyone's been excited about getting to this place. And those various different coaching groups will make their recommendations through my office and into the league. And then we'll be able to communicate that to you guys all as we iron it all out.
Dirk Facer, followed by Josh Furlong.
Hey, Mark, did the developments in Boulder ultimately determine the date when football could start? Obviously, if everybody wanted to go, start at the same time.
Dirk, that decision was made in the president's meeting, and I'm not there, and I wouldn't comment if I knew, because it's not my meeting to comment on. I can tell you that obviously the developments in Boulder certainly caught my attention, caught our athletic director's attention. Rick George was able to update us on what's going on. Just another example of the challenges, of this virus, and not just for the community, but just to universities and all of those things. So, whether it's Boulder tomorrow or whoever, Boulder today, I should say, or someone else tomorrow, we just have to be able to manage and be flexible. And I think all of that, Dirk, goes to what President Schill said yesterday, that, there will be exit ramp things that could come up that our presidents and CEOs say this is not in our best interest, and we're going to pull the plug on that. That's certainly their option. We have different ways that we'll calculate game by game, but they certainly have options to say this isn't something we can do right now. So we're all going to have to remain flexible. That's the message that I sent all our student athletes last night, that this is great news, but your flexibility is going to continue to be required, and your patience, because you just don't know what's next. Stay safe and stay what you can, control what you can control to keep yourself safe.
Okay, we'll finish with our last three in the queue here. Josh Furlong, David James, then Josh Newman.
Mark, obviously no fans in the stadium, but have you, in terms of logistics maybe, have you as a conference or even as an athletic department talked about what media interaction will be like with the various teams, whether that be leading up to it or even on game day? Like, if there is that possibility, does media have to be tested? Like, what are those types of options available?
I know this will shock you guys, but we haven't got there yet. But I'm sure Paul Kirk will work with the league and we'll figure it out. Obviously, you guys need to do your work, and the premise of the concept of these stadiums is working people will be there. We also know that our student athletes and our coaches will be able to have family and certain guests, very limited. That was very important in that where you can. And right now, today, Utah would be able to have some of our student athlete guests still be there. And so we'll work on all those specifics with the teams. But I'll let Paul figure out what we need to do for you guys. And I'm sure your follow-up question is, should you have food and those kind of things, but we'll let Paul make that decision.
All right, David James, then Josh Newman.
How will the testing be paid for? Is each school on their own there? Is the conference doing something as a group? Is the conference bearing the cost? How does that work? That's a new expense in tough financial times.
Yeah, we call that a coming out of the center expense, because it's a testing program that obviously has been arranged by the Pac-12. So they'll handle that. We've continued to have our contract with our testing group. We'll continue to work with them. We know there's still going to be a requirement to PCR test on a weekly basis, and of course, if we get a positive, that we would obviously want to back that up with a PCR test. So David, we'll continue to have our contract with ARUP here. They've been unbelievable. And the conference will handle the expenses for for the new antigen test.
Okay, our final question will come from Josh Newman.
Mark, as Larry kind of starts the finalization here of his non-conference schedule, I know that there's a bunch of one-off guarantee games at the Huntsman Center. Have any of those been pushed a year, number one? And two, would you prefer that some or most of the non-conference stuff stays regionally or even locally?
Josh, I don't really have comments on that just yet. Kyle Brennan has been leading that. I've been getting briefed. I've been talking to Larry, but it's something I'm going to have a lot more insight on for you next week. I think we just, obviously there's so much to play in. I think it's 5 to 7 or 5 to 9. I can't recall right off the top of my head how many non-conference games that we're going to have. We have to look at the dates. Obviously the first decision is we have to decide 18 to 20 conference games. And then once we have that all finalized, we can back from there. But there could be some great games for Utah that are outside of the region, and I don't want to just dismiss those. We know we're dealing with our our MTE event. We're in daily conversation with them, so we have to kind of get through all that. And it's the same with Lynn on the women's side. Very complicated. The good news is now that we have some understanding, the testing standards were just released. We can have conversations about our testing standards, and where there's fit, we'll want to make that fit.
Thank you very much, Mark. That concludes our press conference today, and also want to thank all of you for joining us and for your coverage. Have a good day.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.